He's an animal. He'll always be an animal. We just put him in a cage for a little while. And then he's gonna get out. And then he's gonna hurt one of us again.
Sobre o que falar do ex-namorado Daniel Cravinhos e como se comportar diante da câmera.
Jacqueline! Please wake up! I killed my sister, okay? I know I'm going to jail for life, all right? I understand that.
We've all met entitled people, behaving as if they can only be right and everyone else is wrong. Some are truly dangerous narcissists, manipulating others into giving them attention, money, and even love. They never give anything back. Why would they? If they believe they are the best person in the room and others should be honored to be around them. Sadly, evil, entitled teens can prove deadly for their loving families or anyone who stands in the way of their outrageous agendas. Here are 3 cases of some of the worst ones out there. Sao Paulo is Brazil's economic heart and most populous city. It's got history, architecture, culture, and job opportunities in just about every sector. Over 4,000 families in Sao Paulo are millionaires. It was the same for the Von Richin family in the early 2000s. Manfred Albert von Richin was a successful engineer who had come to Brazil from Germany. In Sao Paulo, he had become the director of the company managing all the highways and roads leading out of the city. The mother, Maricia, was also a successful psychiatrist. She was gentle and kind, but famously friendly and outgoing in her inner circle. Pretty much everyone who knew her loved her. Manfred and Marissa met while in university, fell in love, and got married in the late 1970s. On November 3rd, 1983, their first child was born, Suzanne. 4 years later, Suzanne had a little brother, Andreas. It's safe to say the kids had it all, at least on paper: a loving family, a very stable financial situation, and a top education at Sao Paulo's most prestigious private schools. Both Suzanne and Andreas excelled at school. Suzanne was described as shy and soft-spoken. She was never among the popular kids at school, but she did make friends, and she seemed to get on well with her family. Fluent in 3 languages and freshly graduated from a German high school, Suzanne started studying law at the Pontifical Catholic University of Sao Paulo. Suzanne yearned for a prestigious money-making career, but one might wonder why. The Von Richins had a net worth of 17 million euros, and according to some reports, Manfred had another 10 million embezzled in a Swiss bank account. Of course, many kids grow up wanting to follow in their parents' footsteps, but if the Von Richins made a big chunk of their money with high-paying jobs, Suzanne would have wanted to do the same. However, the Swiss bank account was in Suzanne's name, and she was scheduled to receive all of its money when she finished her studies, so yeah, she really had all she could wish for. But you guys know what this video is about, so you probably figured Suzanne was not the grateful type. In 1999, Andreas had developed a passion for model airplanes. It was at a model airplane fair that the family started talking to a 19-year-old boy named Daniel. He was a passionate and talented model airplane builder, so Andreas asked his family if they could pay Daniel to teach Andreas his skills. They said yes, and Daniel started visiting the house. It wasn't long before he met Suzanne, and the two fell in love. But this soon became a movie classic story of 2 social classes colliding. While Suzanne was privileged, to say the least, Daniel and his brother Christian were high school dropouts who worked as mechanics. Suzanne suspected that her family wouldn't approve of this relationship, so for a while she kept it a secret. Eventually, Manfred and Marissa found out. To Suzanne's surprise, they said it was not a problem, but that's because they believed Daniel to be a law student who built model airplanes. Daniel was a liar. While he did used to make model airplanes, he'd quit that hobby, and he was never a university student. He was just saying fancy things to get into the Von Richins' graces. In reality, Daniel had a habit of smoking weed every day and had no intention of going back to school. He didn't even want to work anymore. In his mind, if he was dating a millionaire, he was set for life. It's easy to see how once the lies were exposed, Manfred and Marissa did not want their daughter to date Daniel anymore. Surprisingly, it was Andreas who covered for his sister time and time again. He still saw Daniel as a good friend, so he would concoct all sorts of complex stories while Daniel and Suzanne were off to motels. Then came a month-long holiday to Europe in 2002. It was just Manfred and Maricia. It had been a long time since the two were able to enjoy some couple time together. So they left Suzanne and Andreas at home. Suzanne was now 18. It was her responsibility to keep the house in order. Instead, she invited Daniel to move in for the whole month. Day after day, the two got drunk used substances together by the pool. Andreas covered for his sister as much as he could, but this was too much even for him. So when the parents got back, they found out everything. Countless fights ensued, and Suzanne begged her dad to buy her an apartment so she and Daniel could live happily ever after there. Manfred told his daughter she was free to do whatever she liked as long as she did it with her own money. He also threatened to cut off her allowance. Instead of just realizing how privileged she had been thus far, Suzanne was enraged, so she and Daniel came up with a plan. On November 1st, 2002, screams could be heard from the Von Richins mansion. Suzanne and Andreas had snuck out of the house for the night. When they came back at 4 a.m., they discovered their parents' lifeless bodies. Their lives were taken in their sleep, but the manner was so gruesome, it can't be described here. Let's just say the authorities had a hard time identifying them. The house had also been robbed, but was not ransacked. First of all, the detectives learned that the family's alarm never went off or notified the guards stationed across the street. So whoever had entered the house had disarmed the alarm. The robbers appeared to have trashed very specific parts of the house, not as if they were looking for cash or valuables, but as if they were trying to make it look like a robbery. In the office, papers were thrown uniformly on the ground. There were no signs of forced entry, and some rooms were completely untouched. This was not your usual burglary gone wrong. Detectives observed the Von Richin children with an attentive eye. Andreas was so upset that he was in and out of panic attacks throughout the first day. Suzanne was sobbing calmly. Of course, everyone reacts to shock differently, but the detectives remembered her calm demeanor throughout their investigation. Things took an even stranger turn when they interrogated the siblings. It turns out that Suzanne had snuck Andreas out of the house around 9 p.m. the previous day. They went to a local party, and Suzanne ran off to a motel with Daniel for a few hours. Then at 4 a.m., the siblings returned home, only to find their parents gone. Manfred and Maricia were laid to rest around Suzanne's birthday. But while most people were dressed soberly and crying, Suzanne turned up in a sexy outfit. Still, she wanted all the attention. And 3 days after her parents were slain, Suzanne hosted a pool party. Did she really not think the detectives would find this suspicious? Then came an anonymous tip. A friend of the family phoned law enforcement with a strange piece of information. A young man named Daniel Cravinhos had just bought an expensive motorcycle up front with $100 bills. This was Daniel's brother, the poor mechanic. How did he have this kind of money? And why did this happen just days after the Von Richins' deaths? The Suzuki motorbike was soon confiscated by authorities. Christian was also interrogated. Within the hour, he cracked. Christian confessed to taking the Von Richins' lives at Daniel and Suzanne's orders. Daniel and Suzanne had a simple plan: unalive her parents and live off the 17 million euros they would inherit. Funny enough, they never thought that they would get arrested for such an obvious scheme. Suzanne and Daniel were in jail just days after the incident. Suzanne confessed but refused to admit that money was a motive. She acted as though it was real love, hindered by a misunderstanding family. When Daniel confessed, he made it very clear that the main motive was doing nothing and living off someone else's riches. Through his confession, Daniel pointed out something that oftentimes happens in cases like this. This was not real love. Daniel and Suzanne broke it off as soon as they were arrested. They had professed eternal love to one another and justified familicide with love. And yet, when things got difficult, they were quick to stop trying. This was not the first case of dumb, evil teenagers who kill for love then break up as soon as they get arrested. It makes it so much more heartbreaking to the victims. Shockingly, Suzanne was allowed to walk free for 4 years awaiting her trial. During those years, she gave interviews where she cried and blamed Daniel for everything. She thought it would improve her image, but a cameraman filmed her lawyer encouraging her to cry and act regretful. Her fakeness was exposed to thousands of people following the case.
Sobre o que falar do ex-namorado Daniel Cravinhos e como se comportar diante da câmera.
On July 17, 2006, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian's trials began. During the trial, it was revealed that on the night of November 1st, Suzanne and Daniel did not sneak out to a motel. Instead, they left Andreas at the party and hurried back to Suzanne's home, along with Christian. There, Suzanne checked on her parents to see if they were asleep. She gave the all clear and disabled the home alarm. Suzanne sat on the family sofa while Daniel and Christian put on gloves and went upstairs, armed with crowbars and hammers. When the couple refused to give in, the brothers them with towels and trash bags. Then they attempted to stage a robbery, quite dumbly so, and Daniel and Suzanne went to a hotel. Yeah, they did you-know-what minutes after taking 2 innocent lives. These 3 were nothing short of evil, and Suzanne's entitlement is utterly repulsive. She never apologized for what she did. She kept blaming Daniel until her sentencing. On July 22nd, the 3 were found guilty of murder. Suzanne and Daniel were sentenced to 40 years in prison. Christian received 2 years less. Suzanne never accepted her fate. She continued to appeal her sentence, citing personality disorders that led her to commit the heinous act, as if she did not know what she was doing. All of her appeals were rejected. Being a self-entitled monster is not an excuse or an appeal argument. Andreas never recovered from Suzanne's crime. In 2017, he broke into someone's home, disheveled, and claiming he saw no reason to live anymore. He was admitted to a mental hospital after this incident. This is just one of the huge scars Suzanne left on the world. She is the epitome of the evil, entitled child who, instead of loving and appreciating her family, plots to remove them and live off their money. Some teens are not entitled brats in the sense that they want their family's net worth without working for it. No, some teens just think that they can take whatever they want from strangers, such as the case of Jeremiah King, Rodriguez Christopher, and 2 of their friends.
They were teenagers when they were convicted for their role in the 2015 murder of an Albuquerque man in his driveway.
This is Steve Garricky. He was a popular bartender at the Spectators Bar in Albuquerque. He was known for his kind, outgoing nature and his superhuman listening abilities. He always had a kind word to say to wandering strangers and regulars alike. But one night in May 2015, his world turned upside down in the most tragic way. He was returning home from his shift at Spectators when he caught 6 teenage boys leaving his home. They were snickering and joking with one another, proud of their most recent burglary. There was zero remorse or even worry on their faces. Stealing from someone else's house was completely normal in their eyes. However, when Steve saw this, he was not going to let it go. So he confronted the 6 boys in his driveway. That's when one of the boys pulled out a firearm and fired into Steve's chest. Steve barely had the time to figure out what was happening. He had no time to say goodbye to his loved ones or call for help. He died alone, afraid, trying to defend his home and valuables. And the 6 teenagers left, laughing. The following day, Steve's best friend, Joni, found out that his body had been found in front of his home. She had been his best friend for 41 years. They were like twins to one another. It's been devastating. I don't know what I'm going to do without Steve. He was such a giving person. He would do everything and anything for anybody. Someone else came forth, Steve's daughter, Heather. Heartbreakingly, she pointed out that Steve's wife was inside the house that night too. Steve saved her life by confronting the boys before they could continue the burglary.
He was at his home and he was protecting my mother. And if he hadn't done that, my mom would be dead too.
It's particularly heartbreaking when bad things happen to good people. And when law enforcement revealed the ages of the suspects, Steve's case became even more shocking. Christopher Rodriguez, 16, Jeremiah King, 16, 17-year-old Ryan Archbeck, and 15-year-old Andrew Hubler will be tried as serious youthful offenders and charged as adults. 2 others, both 14, will be charged as juveniles. Yep, 2 were as young as 14, and the oldest one in the crew was still a minor. It's hard to fathom how people so young can be so evil. Zero conscience, remorse, and humanity. Luckily, all 6 teens were arrested shortly after the incident.
One of the 6 teens accused of murdering local bartender Stephen Garrick may be going to jail, but not for the murders. The teen faces up to 15 years in prison, but that's only if he's sentenced as an adult.
Wait, why are their sentences so light?
18-year-old Ryan Archbeck was facing a murder charge in this case. Today in court, there was no mention of murder at all, as he pled guilty to 4 lesser counts.
Indeed, due to the teens' young ages and the complex circumstances of 6 people burglarizing a house, but only 1 pulling the trigger, they were offered various deals.
With respect to aggravated burglary with a deadly weapon, count 2 of the indictment, how do you plead?
Guilty.
Are you doing this because you think it's the best thing for you to do?
Yes, sir.
The lesser charges are even harder to fathom considering what the detectives found out after the incident. That night, the boys didn't just settle for Steve's home. Throughout the entire night, they had been mobbing, breaking into cars and homes, and wreaking havoc for a laugh. Their entitlement and violence knew no bounds. They were out to steal and destroy, and for them, that was fun. After Ryan's hearing was over, state prosecutor Larissa Calloway said she was happy with his sentence.
We're pleased with the outcome in this particular case. However, in a lot of ways, it's still just the beginning.
5 more teens would follow, and she would make sure they were tried as fairly and harshly as possible. A man's life had been taken, and none of the teens seemed to show any remorse. Larissa also pointed out a relevant fact in all similar cases. No matter what the final sentence would be for the teens, it would never be enough to help the victim's family move on.
I think their opinion is very similar to a lot of other individuals who've lost someone in such a violent way, which is that 200 years, 500 years would never be enough.
However, trials can be long, strenuous, and in many ways traumatizing to victims' families too. They have to relive the trauma of losing their loved one, meet with their killer face to face every day, and live with the fear that they will get away with murder. Hearings and plea deals are many times the cleaner, simpler solution for both parties. When Jeremiah King turned up in court, he was smirking at the cameras. This was the 16-year-old who had pulled the trigger and ended Steve's life. Now he seemed amused by the situation. He seemed to enjoy the spotlight. Steve's wife was devastated to see his remorseless killer just a few feet away from her.
I will never have him back.
In February 2017, Jeremiah was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. After his sentencing, he apologized to the family.
I can't do much but say sorry. I could prove it by doing good while I'm in prison.
However, in 2019, the media caught up with Jeremiah. It turns out that he got in trouble on a regular, almost daily basis while in prison.
What we found was hundreds of pages of disciplinary records from the New Mexico Department of Corrections. An investigation last November links him to an assault on an inmate at the state prison in Hobbs.
He also made his own moonshine and skipped all GED classes. Jeremiah's former friend, Christopher Rodriguez, was sentenced to 14 years behind bars.
One of the last teens to be sentenced in connection with the death of an Albuquerque bartender learned his fate today.
Christopher was sentenced to 14 years behind bars, after which he also gave an apology.
First off, I want to apologize to you and the family. I never meant for this to happen.
But throughout his stay in the juvenile facility, he was a problem inmate. The prosecution pointed out during his sentencing that he had clearly not learned a thing from his punishment thus far. During the initial court hearing, he even showed his finger to the cameras. His defense attorney argued that he had an extremely difficult upbringing and that he wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. But in a situation like this, even a teen has to pay for his actions. Many teens have had difficult, traumatic childhoods, yet very few choose violence the way that Christopher Rodriguez did. Much like Jeremiah, Christopher did not appear to change for the better while in prison.
Rodriguez is accused of joining 4 others in a second-floor prison cell to assault an inmate. Video shows him quickly get out of there afterwards, jumping down the stairs.
Several months were added to his sentence. Steve's daughter said,
"He's an animal. He'll always be an animal. We just put him in a cage for a little while, and then he's gonna get out, and then he's gonna hurt one of us again."
It's truly heartbreaking to think that these teens never meant their apologies or their promises to do better. They still show no remorse for their crimes and continue to behave the same way they did before their arrest. How do you begin to rehabilitate a teen so far removed from humanity? This is 18-year-old Abdulia Sanchez, just seconds before she unalived her little sister, 14-year-old Jacqueline. Jacqueline was preparing for her 15th birthday while in the car with her sister. Abdulia, however, was live streaming, confident she could multitask and make a few more followers in the process. It all happened in a matter of seconds. 1 minute, Abdulia was making faces at the camera, the next she screamed, and the video ended in a loud bang. She remained at the scene in utter shock until authorities arrived at the scene and placed her under arrest. When they tested her alcohol level, they discovered the sad truth. Abdulia was driving under the influence. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too, and she never cared that she had another life on board. As soon as she crashed, she took to Instagram to say this.
I love my sister to death. I don't give a This is the last thing I wanted to happen to us, but it just did.
Was she covering for herself? Who hops on Instagram minutes after taking their sibling's life?
Jacqueline, please wake up. I killed my sister, okay? I know I'm going to jail for life, all right? I understand that. This is the last thing I wanted to happen, okay? I love you. Rest in peace, sweetie.
I don't know about about you, but she sounds a bit too calm for me. Almost as if she's making sure the internet doesn't perceive her as evil, making sure the world hears how she loved her little sister. Who live streams their sister's death? This was the question on everybody's mind as the case made headlines. When she was arrested, Abdulia was asked why on earth she would live stream while driving. Her answer? Everybody does it. Why not? People take videos of them in cars like all the time. And I'm only 18, we're still young. Abdulia still didn't seem to show true remorse for her actions. She was taken to jail in Fresno and put on a $300,000 bail. Later on, she had something else to say to the media. I didn't even know I looked like a monster. Like, I look like a freaking horrible monster. That was not my intention at all. Again, this was all about herself. She was concerned with how she looked to the public, not with what she had done. She was charged with drunk driving and vehicular but that wasn't enough to make her apologize and go quietly. From prison, she made a public statement saying she live streamed her sister's death so she could get a proper burial. In short, she did it for money. I made that video because I knew I had more than 5,000 followers. It was the only way my sister would get a decent burial. I would never expose my sister like that. If that was the case, why didn't she say so as soon as she was arrested? No, this was a hero story designed to make her look good. She was too entitled to accept her fault and release an apology. Sorry for making that video. I look awful but accomplished my goal. I anticipated the public donating money because my family isn't rich. Don't know why, but I'm pretty sure the public would have donated more if she had apologized and asked kindly for burial money. Abdulia pleaded not guilty. She was found guilty of DUI and manslaughter nevertheless and sentenced to 6 years and 4 months. It sounds like a short sentence for someone with so little remorse and so much infuriating entitlement. Let's just hope that she learns something by the time she is released. Hey, thanks for watching. What are your thoughts on these cases? Do you know similar stories? Let me know in a comment. And before you leave, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more content. See you next time.